What if I told you that inside a dusty storage unit, behind rusted metal doors and rows of black trash bags, lay not garbage, but a forgotten legacy worth more than gold? This is not just another story about money. This is about a desperate mother, standing on the edge of losing everything, who took one reckless gamble and uncovered a treasure that changed her family's fate forever. Tonight's story isn't only about handbags, jewelry, or history. It's about promises kept beyond the grave, the kind of second chances we all pray for, and the courage to risk it all when you have nothing left to lose. This is a celebrity undercover story, a tale of survival, love, and the shocking moment when a widow bought a storage unit full of trash bags and found something inside that stunned the world. Stay until the end, because the last twist is something you will never forget. What if I told you that sometimes the biggest stories don't start with riches or fame or power, but with silence? Not the silence of peace, but the heavy silence of a woman lying awake at 3 in the morning. The kind of silence where the house groans with winter air, and every small sound, every creak, every hum of the refrigerator feels louder than her heartbeat. That's where Naomi Carter's story begins. Naomi was 48 years old, a widow, and the kind of woman you could pass on the street without ever knowing the storms she carried inside. Her dark curls were streaked with silver long before their time. Her shoulders had grown heavy, not from age but from responsibility. And on that November night in Detroit, she sat up in bed with eyes wide open, staring into the dark, knowing sleep would not come. 2 years had passed since her husband Robert lost his battle with cancer. 2 years since the laughter in the house had shifted into whispers, and the bills began to pile higher than the family photos on the mantel. Naomi had promised him she would hold the family together, but every overdue notice on the kitchen table was proof of how close she was to breaking that promise. She swung her legs out of bed, careful not to wake her son. Marcus was 17, a dreamer with a basketball always within reach. The boy still believed that hard work and practice could take him to college. Naomi wanted to believe too, but she had seen too many promises buried under debt. The clock on the nightstand blinked 3:07 a.m. in cold red digits. Naomi wrapped a sweater around herself and walked the familiar path down the hall. She didn't turn on the lights. She knew this house by memory. The squeaky board near the bathroom door, the spot where the hallway rug curled, the narrow kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee and fried chicken from yesterday's dinner. She opened the junk drawer, the one Robert used to keep his tools, receipts, and those reading glasses he refused to replace. She slipped them onto her face, though they weren't hers, and carried the foreclosure notice back to the table. 60 days to vacate. The words burned into her eyes as if they'd been carved in stone. Naomi reached for the photograph that sat at the center of the table. Robert's smile stared back at her, frozen in time. She traced his jawline with her thumb. "I promised you I'd take care of them, Bobby," she whispered. "But I'm running out of miracles." In the darkened window, her reflection looked like a stranger. Hollow cheeks, tired eyes. A woman preserved in grief like an insect trapped in amber. Time had stopped the night Robert died, and though the calendar moved forward, Naomi remained frozen in the past. She sat there until the morning alarm rang at 6. It wasn't her alarm, but Marcus's. The sound of cheap chimes buzzed from the next room. Naomi dressed slowly, pulling on the only professional outfit she had left that still fit properly. A navy blazer and slacks she had worn to at least 5 interviews this year. Each time she washed them, the fabric thinned a little more. Each time she ironed them, she wondered if this would be the outfit she finally wore to a job that said yes. Marcus stumbled into the kitchen, his 6-foot frame still growing faster than their grocery budget. He wore a faded t-shirt with a hole near the collar and basketball shorts. His sneakers, Naomi noticed with a pang, were splitting at the seams. "Another interview, Mom?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Marketing coordinator at Westfield Automotive," Naomi said, forcing a smile. "It's perfect. Just like the job I had before." Marcus nodded, though his eyes betrayed his doubt. "You'll get it." "Of course I will." She lied. On the counter sat $10 she had pulled from her purse. "Lunch money," she said, sliding it toward him. "Mom," he started. But she cut him off with a look. "Take it, Marcus, please." He slipped it into his pocket without another word. Her phone buzzed. Aaliyah's name lit up the screen. Naomi answered quickly, putting on her everything's fine voice. "Mom, I got an email from the bursar's office," Aaliyah said breathlessly. "If I don't pay the past due balance by next Friday, I can't register for next semester." Naomi's throat tightened. "It's just a mix-up with the payment plan, baby. I'll handle it today." "Are you sure?" "Because I can pick up extra shifts at the coffee shop." "Absolutely not. Your job is to study. That's what your dad wanted." "But Mom, I promise, Aaliyah, everything will be fine." The call ended, leaving Naomi clutching the phone as if it might dissolve in her hands. She drove Marcus to school, then headed to her interview. The route took her past the community college where she once taught business classes, the elementary school where Marcus learned to read, and the hospital where Robert spent his final days. Each building stood like a monument, a chapter from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. At Westfield Automotive, the hiring manager smiled kindly, too kindly. She was 10 years younger than Naomi, polished and polite. The interview followed the same script as all the others. Compliments on her resume, admiration for her years of experience, and then the line Naomi had grown to dread. "You're very impressive, Mrs. Carter, but honestly, I worry you might be overqualified for this role." Overqualified. The corporate word for too old, too desperate, too much baggage. Naomi forced a professional smile. "I'm looking for stability, not advancement. I'd be committed to this role long term. We'll be in touch," the manager said. Standing to shake her hand, the handshake was brief. Polite, final, Naomi walked to her car, climbed inside, and sat perfectly still for 1 full minute. No tears, no screams. Just 60 seconds to let the defeat wash over her before she rebuilt her armor again. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. "How'd it go?" Naomi typed back one word. "Great." She started the car, but instead of driving straight home, she took the long way. Past rows of shuttered factories. Past empty lots where children once played. Past the streets she and Robert used to walk when life felt endless and hopeful. The sky was gray. The highway stretched like a ribbon of steel into nowhere. Winter had come early that year, and it felt like it had come for her, too. At the junction with Highway 18, something caught her eye. A neon sign flickering against the dull morning light. "Storage auction today, treasures await." 11 a.m. sharp. Naomi almost dismissed it. Who has time for games when your life is falling apart? But her chest tightened. A memory surfaced. Robert sitting up in his hospital bed, his voice weak but clear. "Sometimes, Maggie, sometimes you have to risk everything. To save everything." Naomi gripped the steering wheel. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was reckless. But as the traffic light turned green, she made her choice. She took the exit. Naomi had driven down countless Detroit streets in her lifetime, but that morning they looked different. The neon sign about the auction still flashed in her mind as she steered her old Honda toward the interview. The car rattled at every pothole, its heater wheezing, but she kept her eyes forward. This was supposed to be the chance. Maybe not the big break, but at least a small one. Something to keep the lights on, to buy Marcus new sneakers, to keep Aaliyah in school for one more semester. The parking lot of Westfield Automotive Marketing looked sharp and modern, filled with clean sedans and shiny SUVs. Naomi parked at the far end, staring at the glass building in front of her. She checked her blazer in the rearview mirror, dabbing powder on her forehead to hide the shine. Her stomach twisted. She whispered to her reflection, "Hold it together, Naomi, just hold it together." Inside, the lobby gleamed. White walls, brushed steel furniture, potted plants that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. The receptionist gave her a polite but distracted smile, pointing her toward the elevator. Naomi rode up to the 3rd floor, her heart pounding. She adjusted her purse strap, rehearsed the lines she had practiced in front of the bathroom mirror. "I'm adaptable. I bring 20 years of marketing experience. I know how to lead, but I'm not afraid to follow." The hiring manager was waiting at the end of a hallway, a woman maybe 35, polished in a gray suit. Her handshake was warm, her smile rehearsed. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming in." "Thank you for seeing me," Naomi replied, willing her voice to stay steady. They sat across a table in a glass-walled office. Naomi talked about her past experience, coordinating campaigns for regional brands, teaching classes at the community college, mentoring younger staff. The manager nodded, smiled, and even took notes. Naomi dared to hope, but as the minutes ticked by, the rhythm became familiar. Too familiar. Compliments on her resume. Admiration for her professionalism. Then came the line. "You have an impressive background, Mrs. Carter. Honestly, you're more qualified than most of our current staff. But..." The manager's smile softened as though preparing to deliver bad news gently. "I worry you might be overqualified for this particular position." Overqualified. The word hit like a brick. Naomi had heard it before too many times. It was the polite way of saying, "You're too old, too expensive, too desperate." She forced her lips into a professional smile. "I assure you I'm looking for stability, not advancement. I'd be committed to this role long term." The manager nodded sympathetically. "We'll be in touch by the end of next week." But Naomi already knew. That was the script. That was how they ended it. The handshake at the door was quick, perfunctory. By the time she stepped back into the elevator, Naomi felt the weight of another door closing. Another opportunity gone before it ever began. She walked back to her car, climbed inside, and let her hands fall onto the steering wheel. For exactly 60 seconds, she sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead. No tears, no screams, just a quiet surrender to disappointment. She allowed the weight of rejection to press down, then inhaled sharply, as if pulling armor back onto her body. Her phone buzzed. Marcus's text lit the screen. "How'd it go?" Naomi typed back quickly, "Great," one word. A lie she'd told too many times. She didn't drive home immediately. Instead, she took the long way, letting the road unwind her thoughts. She passed familiar landmarks that no longer felt like markers of pride, but reminders of loss. The community college where she once stood at a whiteboard, teaching marketing principles to eager students. The playground where Marcus had learned to shoot his first basket, his laughter echoing in the air. The hospital, looming gray against the skyline, where Robert had spent his final weeks. Each place a chapter in a book she no longer wanted to read. Each memory written in red ink of grief. Her phone rang again, pulling her back to the present. Aaliyah's name. Naomi answered, pressing brightness into her voice. "Hey, baby girl. Mom, I got another email from the bursar's office. They're serious this time. If I don't pay the past due balance by next Friday, I can't register for next semester." Naomi gripped the steering wheel tighter. "It's just a mix-up with the payment plan. I'll handle it today. Are you sure? Because I can pick up extra shifts at the coffee shop. I can even—" "No," Naomi cut her off. "Absolutely not. Your job is to study. That's what your dad wanted. But Mom, I promise Aaliyah, everything will be fine." She ended the call before her voice could betray the lie. The highway stretched ahead, gray and empty. Winter had come early that year, frost biting at the edges of the windshield. Naomi turned onto the service road, thinking only of how to delay the inevitable. Which bill could wait? Which payment could be ignored just a little longer? And then she saw it. At the junction with Highway 18, a neon sign flickered. Bright letters against the dull morning sky. "Storage action today. Treasures await 11:20 a.m. sharp." Naomi almost laughed. Treasures? For people like her, treasures existed only in dreams. Storage auctions were for scavengers, for resellers, for people with money to risk. She had $72 left in her wallet after gas. She had no right even to think about it. But her chest tightened. A memory surfaced, uninvited but sharp. Robert in his hospital bed, clutching her hand during one of his rare lucid moments. His voice had been raspy, but the words had seared into her heart. "Naomi, sometimes you have to risk everything." To save everything, the light turned green. She could go straight home, back to the bills, back to the foreclosure notice, back to the sinking ship of her life. Or she could take the exit. Her hands trembled on the wheel. "Don't be stupid," she whispered. "Don't you dare," but her foot pressed the pedal. The turn signal clicked. And just like that, Naomi Carter took the exit. Naomi's tires crunched against gravel as she pulled into the lot of secure lock storage. A sprawling grid of metal doors and chain-link fences on the edge of the city. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of sky that warned snow was coming. She parked between a gleaming Ford F-150 and a white van stamped with Mike's Antiques and Resale in bold lettering. Her car looked out of place. Rust at the edges. A dent on the passenger side, the sound of the engine coughing as she turned it off. Naomi glanced at the dashboard, gas tank barely above empty. She shoved her purse strap higher onto her shoulder and stepped out. The parking lot was already half full. Men leaned against their trucks, smoking and joking like old comrades. A woman in designer boots tapped at a tablet, scrolling with quick precision. Another man lugged a small step stool, ready to get a better angle when the units rolled open. Naomi felt the weight of eyes on her. The newcomer, the one who didn't belong. Inside the cramped office, the smell of burnt coffee filled the air. Behind the counter sat a balding man in his 60s with a name tag. Frank, manager. He looked up, sizing her up with the ease of someone who had seen hundreds come and go. Here for the auction? He asked. Naomi nodded. Yes, first time. Frank slid a clipboard across the counter. $25 registration fee. That gets you a bidder's paddle. You can view units from the doorway only. No stepping inside, no touching until you've paid. All sales final. You win it, you clear it within 48 hours. Understand? Naomi's hands trembled as she pulled out bills from her envelope. That envelope held nearly everything she had left. The 25 registration cut into it like a knife, but she nodded. I understand. He studied her for a moment, maybe recognizing the desperation in her eyes. Some folks have been doing this for decades, Frank said quietly. Don't let them scare you. What do people usually find? She asked, stalling, testing her own resolve. Frank shrugged. Furniture, tools, collectibles? Sometimes trash, sometimes treasure. That's the gamble. The word echoed in Naomi's mind. Gamble. That's exactly what this was. She signed the form, took bidder's paddle number 23, and stepped back into the cold air. A group of about 30 people had gathered outside. Most were men, middle-aged, their jackets frayed at the cuffs, their eyes sharp and practiced. They chatted easily, sharing cigarettes, laughing at old war stories of auctions past. Naomi hugged her purse to her side, an outsider clinging to the edges. A heavy-set man in a leather jacket noticed her standing alone. He ambled over, his face weathered but kind. First time? Naomi nodded, clutching her paddle tighter. He extended a hand. Earl Jenkins. Been doing this 15 years. Got a little shop over in Lincoln Park. Naomi Carter, she said softly. Earl chuckled. Everyone starts curious. Then it gets in your blood. He gestured at the crowd. See that big guy in the John Deere cap? That's Mike Denton. Tools are his thing. He'll fight you for anything with a hammer in it. And that lady with the tablet? Sandra Price. She knows every designer brand under the sun. Don't bother bidding if she's interested. The rest? Dealers, flippers, scavengers. What about you? Naomi asked. I'm what you call a generalist, Earl said. A little bit of everything. Furniture, antiques, knickknacks. But here's a tip. He lowered his voice. Set yourself a limit and stick to it. Auction fever will clean you out faster than the casino. Before Naomi could respond, a whistle pierced the air. Frank stood at the front of the crowd with a megaphone. All right, folks. We got 12 units today. Same rules as always. View from the doorway. No flashlights inside. Minimum bids start at 25. Let's begin. The crowd moved like a single organism toward the first row of units. Naomi followed, staying close to Earl, grateful for his easy mentorship. Unit number 1 rolled open with a screech. Inside, a leather sectional, an oak dining set, a bedroom suite. The bidding started fast. $800, then $1,000, then $200. Naomi's pulse quickened, watching strangers throw money around like candy. A man in a moving company shirt snapped it up for $450. Commercial mover, Earl whispered. He'll flip that for triple. Unit number 2 held exercise equipment. Barely used treadmill, dumbbells, a stationary bike. A young couple grabbed it for $350. Unit number 3 through number 6 followed the same pattern. Furniture, electronics, items with obvious value. Professional bidders swooped in confidently, their paddles flashing in the air. Naomi didn't raise hers once. Her feet ached. Her courage wavered. By unit there were 7, she was already considering leaving. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she'd just thrown away $25 she couldn't afford. Then Frank rolled open the door to unit number 19. The metal screeched as daylight revealed stacks of heavy-duty black contractor bags, piled floor to ceiling, dozens of them. Some torn, showing hints of fabric, others tied tightly, stacked with surprising care. The crowd groaned. Someone laughed. "Garbage bags? Who's bidding on that?" A woman muttered. "Looks like an eviction cleanout." "Straight to the dump," Earl grimaced beside Naomi. "That's somebody's life swept into trash bags. Happens more than you'd think." But Naomi noticed something different. The bags weren't flimsy kitchen trash bags. These were industrial grade, the kind Robert used back when they moved into their house. And they weren't thrown in haphazardly. They were stacked, methodical, as if someone had cared enough to preserve what was inside. "Starting bid at $25, Frank announced. Silence. No paddles rose. Naomi's heartbeat pounded like a drum. She could almost hear Robert's voice in her ear. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save everything. Before she could second-guess herself, words slipped from her lips. 50! Her paddle shot into the air, heads turned. Earl's eyes widened. 50 for unit number 19, Frank confirmed, clearly surprised. "Do I hear 75? The crowd was quiet. Naomi's breath came shallow. 75. 75 from bidder 23. "Do I hear 100? Again, silence. 100, Naomi blurted, her voice cracking. Earl touched her elbow. "You sure about this?" "You can't see what's in those bags," Naomi's jaw tightened. "I'm sure. 100 going once. Going twice. 200. Naomi's voice rang out, desperate, almost prayerful. A murmur rippled through the crowd. This didn't happen. Nobody fought over garbage bag units. Frank hesitated. 200 going once. Going twice. 250. Naomi cried, almost breathless. The crowd chuckled in disbelief. Sold to bidder 23 for $250. The hammer fell. Naomi's purse felt suddenly lighter. She had $72 left to feed her family for the week. The crowd moved on, already forgetting her, but she remained frozen, staring at her purchase. Earl lingered beside her. His voice softened. "I hope you find something good in there." Naomi swallowed hard. She didn't say it out loud, but in her heart she whispered, "Please, God, let there be something worth saving." Naomi stood in front of unit number 19 long after the rest of the bidders had moved on. The cold air cut through her blazer, but she barely noticed. Behind the metal door sat her gamble. $250 worth of black contractor bags. Some torn, some tied tight, all stacked like bricks in a wall. She swallowed hard. Her palms were damp, her pulse racing. What had she done? She could already hear Marcus's voice. "Mom, you spent what? On trash?" She could hear Aaliyah too. "We could have used that for tuition." The doubts came in waves, but she shook her head. No, she had promised Robert. She had promised her children, and she wasn't about to walk away now. By the time the auction ended, the lot had cleared out. Naomi signed the paperwork in Frank's office, her hand trembling as she counted out her cash. Frank glanced at her with a kind of fatherly pity, but said nothing beyond. "You got 48 hours to empty the unit. Good luck, Miss Carter." Luck. That was all she had left. It was nearly 2 p.m. when she returned to the unit, this time armed with supplies. A tarp from Robert's old workshop, a box cutter, gloves, and tucked into her bag, Marcus's aluminum baseball bat. Not because she expected trouble, though you never knew what lived inside storage units, but because holding it grounded her, made her feel less fragile. The fluorescent lights above flickered as she rolled up the metal door. The screech echoed down the corridor, and there it was, floor-to-ceiling black plastic, her $250 gamble staring back at her. She pulled on her gloves, spread the tarp just outside the entrance, and stepped closer. Dust floated in the air, sparkling in the thin beam of light that broke through a high window. Her hands shook as she dragged the first bag onto the tarp. The plastic was thick, heavy-duty, like it had been packed with care. Her heart hammered as she sliced carefully along one side. The bag sagged open. Naomi held her breath. Inside lay neatly folded clothing. Not random rags, not dirty laundry, but women's clothing, Pressed slacks, silk blouses, a blazer with a price tag still dangling from the sleeve. She picked it up. Chico's, original price $189, thrift tag $12.99, never worn. Naomi blinked. For a moment she just stared at it, half convinced she was imagining things. She reached deeper. Another blouse, this one Ann Taylor. A pair of dress pants, Talbots. Every item folded carefully, preserved despite being sealed in a contractor bag. Her throat tightened. "Okay," she whispered to no one. "Okay." She set the clothes aside and pulled another bag forward. This one heavier. She sliced it open with the same caution. Inside more women's clothing, but higher-end pieces. A leather jacket from Wilson's Leather. A cashmere sweater set. Cocktail dress with a Nordstrom label. Original retail tag. $350. Naomi sat back on her heels, dazed. These weren't rags. This was value. Her pulse quickened. She grabbed a third bag, her hands moving faster now. The zipper of the box cutter tore down the seam. Inside were handbags, 6 of them, nestled among clothes. The first soft leather and buttery beige, instantly recognizable. "Coach," Naomi whispered. Her sister had saved for months to buy one years ago. This one looked barely used. Her hands trembled as she opened it, searching for the telltale signs of authenticity. The stitching, the weight of the hardware, the small interior pocket with a serial number. She pulled out her phone, Googling quickly, and compared. Every detail matched. Retail value, around $380. Naomi pressed the bag to her chest. "Oh my God." She examined the others. Another Coach, a Dooney and Bourke, 3 more with designer logos she didn't recognize but suspected carried weight. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. She opened another bag. Shoes, dozens of pairs, many still in boxes. 9 West Naturalizer Clarks. Not the highest end, but quality. Many unworn. It hit her all at once. This wasn't random junk shoved into bags during an eviction. This was curated, organized, preserved. Whoever had packed these bags had cared. She pulled forward a 5th bag, heavier than the rest. As she cut it open, small boxes spilled out, clinking against each other. Jewelry boxes, Naomi's breath caught. She opened one carefully. Inside lay a silver bracelet with delicate charms. Another box revealed a Brighton necklace in its signature pouch. She opened a small velvet pouch to find Pandora charms, at least 20 of them, each one unique. A heart, a graduation cap, a tiny airplane. Her cousin collected Pandora charms. She knew each cost between $50 and $90. 20 charms meant hundreds of dollars. Naomi pressed her gloved hands to her face, trembling. This wasn't trash. This was treasure. But more than that, it was a lifeline. She glanced back into the unit. Rows of black bags still stacked high, untouched. Dozens of them. Her chest heaved. She had barely opened 5. Naomi pulled out her phone and snapped photos, her hands shaking so much the images blurred. She forced herself to retake them, steady this time. She would need proof. She would need help figuring out where to sell, how to price, how to move carefully. Her mind spun. Could this pay Aaliyah's tuition? Could this save the house? Could this be the miracle? The thought was so dangerous it almost scared her. Hope was a luxury she hadn't let herself feel in years. And yet here it was, flooding her chest like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Naomi laughed, the sound startled and shaky. She pressed her hands together in prayer. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was thanking. God, Robert, the woman who had packed these bags. Maybe all of them. She gathered the items back into the bags, stacking them carefully, more gently than before. She couldn't carry everything home tonight, but she wouldn't leave empty-handed either. She chose 2 Coach purses and a stack of clothing with tags still attached, tucking them into her tote. By the time she closed the door and locked it, dusk was settling over the city. Her car sagged slightly under the weight of her bounty. Driving home, she rehearsed what she would say to Marcus. He would be skeptical. He would worry. But when he saw the bags, when he touched the leather, when he realized what they might be worth, maybe he would believe. As she pulled into the driveway, Marcus appeared at the door, his expression shifting from concern to confusion as he saw her arms laden with purses and clothing. "Mom, what is all that?" Naomi stepped into the kitchen, setting the items on the counter as though revealing jewels to royalty. Her chest rose and fell, adrenaline still surging. I bought a storage unit, she said. Marcus's jaw dropped. You what? It was an auction. I took a chance. On garbage bags? Naomi met his eyes, her own brimming with something he hadn't seen in her in years. Hope. Not garbage, baby, she whispered, lifting the coach bag with trembling hands. Treasure. The kitchen table was never meant for moments like this. It had seen birthday cakes, unpaid bills, and the slow decline of hope. But that night, it became the stage where Naomi Carter and her son, Marcus, stared at purses and clothing worth more than they dared believe. Marcus poked one of the handbags with a skeptical finger. Mom, this looks real. It is real, Naomi said, her voice trembling with conviction. Do you see the stitching? The weight of the leather? Look inside, baby. That's quality. Marcus unzipped the coach bag, running his hands over the lining. He didn't know designer fashion, but even he could tell. This wasn't the kind of thing people threw away. Where did you even find this? Naomi pulled off her gloves, still dusted with the scent of the storage unit. In one of those trash bags, Marcus blinked. So let me get this straight. You blew $250, our grocery money, on garbage bags. And now you're telling me those bags are full of this? Naomi smiled faintly, exhaustion and adrenaline mixing in her blood. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Marcus sank into a chair, running his hands through his hair. He was only 17, but grief had aged him too. He had learned to worry early, to check the mail for overdue notices, to watch his mother paste on a brave face. What if it's fake? He asked quietly. Then we figure something out. Like we always do. Naomi reached across the table and squeezed his hand. But Marcus, what if it's not? The silence between them was heavy, but this time it wasn't hopeless. It was possibility. The next morning, Naomi was back at the unit, her tote bag stuffed with boxes and notebooks. She hadn't slept. Instead, she lay awake thinking of all the unopened bags waiting for her, whispering promises in the dark. She rolled up the door. The air inside was stale, faintly sweet with dust and fabric softener. The mountain of contractor bags loomed like a fortress. Naomi felt both fear and hunger as she pulled the next one forward. The blade of her box cutter slid cleanly, and the bag sagged open. Shoes again. But not ordinary ones. Pair of black leather pumps still in their box labeled 9 West. Another pair of strappy heels with tags attached. Box after box. Some worn once, some never touched. Naomi stacked them carefully, her mind racing through resale prices she had seen online. She opened another bag. This one heavier. Her breath caught as small jewelry boxes tumbled onto the tarp. She picked one up, velvet crushed under her gloved fingers, and opened it slowly. Inside lay a charm bracelet, silver links glittering under the fluorescent light. She opened another box, earrings, delicate hoops marked sterling. Another, Brighton jewelry, popular, recognizable, loved by collectors. Her cousin's voice echoed in her mind, bragging once about Pandora charms. Naomi pulled open a small pouch, and 20 tiny charms spilled into her palm. Hearts, animals, graduation caps, each no bigger than her thumbnail, each worth $50, maybe $90. Her knees went weak. She pressed her hand to her mouth, laughter and disbelief bubbling out. It wasn't trash. It wasn't even close. It was treasure. By noon, she had opened 6 more bags. The tarp was covered in neat piles, blouses, jackets, handbags, jewelry. She stacked boxes of shoes, folded evening gowns carefully, and lined purses along the wall like soldiers. But it wasn't just about the value anymore. It was the care, the precision. Each bag packed as though someone had wanted to preserve these items, not discard them. Naomi sat back, wiping sweat from her brow, and stared at it all. "Who are you?" she whispered. As if in answer, the next bag gave her something different. Instead of clothing or jewelry, she found papers, receipts, carefully folded documents. And at the bottom, tucked into a small envelope, a name written in elegant script, Claudia Whitmore. Naomi traced the name with her gloved finger. For the first time, the faceless owner of the unit became real. Claudia, a woman who had once worn these blouses, carried these purses, folded these dresses with care. Naomi pulled out another envelope and froze. Inside were photographs. She laid them out on the tarp one by one. An older woman with silver hair, impeccably styled, smiling at charity galas, shaking hands at fundraisers, standing beside men in military dress uniforms. Claudia, always elegant, always composed, always with a glass of champagne or an award in her hand. Naomi whispered to the empty unit. You weren't just somebody. You were somebody. That night she brought home more treasures. She spread them across the living room floor, while Marcus knelt beside her, his eyes wide now with awe instead of doubt. This belonged to a woman named Claudia Whitmore, Naomi explained, holding up the envelope. Look at these photos. She wasn't ordinary. She was connected. She had money, taste, style. Marcus picked up a pair of leather gloves, still supple, and shook his head. Why would her stuff end up here? Naomi frowned. That's the question, isn't it? She stacked a pile of Brighton boxes and Coach purses, her mind already calculating. Online, even secondhand, each bag could sell for hundreds. The jewelry could add thousands, and there were still dozens of bags left unopened. For the first time in years, her voice carried something it hadn't carried before. Confidence. Marcus, she said, meeting her son's gaze. I think this might be the break we've been waiting for. His skepticism faded as he looked around the room, at the handbags, the shoes, the jewelry boxes glinting under the lamplight. Mom, he said softly, this doesn't look like junk. This looks like a business, Naomi laughed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But the truth was, the thought had already bloomed in her mind. A business. A second chance. By midnight, Naomi was too wired to sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, Claudia's photographs spread before her. In one, Claudia stood on a manicured lawn beside a man in full military uniform, medals gleaming on his chest. His arm was wrapped proudly around her waist. Naomi turned the photo over. On the back, written in elegant script, Richard and me. Veterans Recognition Ceremony 2015, Richard. Her husband, perhaps. Naomi pressed the photo to her chest. She had never met Claudia, but she felt a connection. Both widows. Both women who had loved and lost. Both women who had tried to preserve pieces of a life that felt too valuable to throw away. The difference was, Naomi had stumbled into Claudia's legacy, and it might just save her family. Naomi closed her eyes and whispered, as if Claudia might somehow hear, thank you. Whoever you were, thank you. She didn't yet know the full truth. She didn't yet know that the bag still hiding in the shadows held more than just clothing and jewelry. That they held history, secrets, and a legacy larger than anything she had dared imagine. But in that moment, sitting in a kitchen still warm from Marcus's laughter, Naomi felt something she hadn't felt since Robert died. Hope. The next morning, Naomi returned to Unit Thar 19 before the sun had fully risen. The air was sharp with cold, her breath visible in the dim light. She held her coffee like a lifeline, her tote stuffed with fresh boxes and a notebook. The unit loomed in front of her, its metal door coated with frost. She slid the lock open and rolled it up. The screech echoed down the long corridor, and once again the fortress of black bags stared back at her. But today it felt different. Today she wasn't just searching for things to sell. She was searching for a person, Claudia Whitmore. The name had haunted her all night. Naomi had whispered it into the silence of her kitchen, turning over the photographs, staring into Claudia's eyes as though they might reveal secrets. A woman with silver hair, graceful posture, and elegant gowns, always in the company of important people, always smiling as though she belonged in every room she entered. Naomi pulled the first bag of the day onto the tarp and sliced it open. Inside were linens folded with precision, embroidered napkins, lace tablecloths, hand-stitched pillowcases. She shook out one napkin and gasped at the initials stitched in gold thread. C.W. Claudia Whitmore, Naomi whispered. She stacked the linens carefully, her fingers brushing the delicate fabric. These weren't thrift store finds. These were heirlooms. The next bag held something stranger. Wrapped in bubble wrap and tissue paper were holiday decorations. Not the kind bought in bulk from Walmart, but ornate collectibles. Hand-blown glass ornaments still in their original boxes. Waterford crystal snowflakes, Lennox figurines. Naomi's breath caught as she lifted one delicately. The weight of it undeniable. These are worth hundreds, she murmured, remembering Marcus's friend whose mom collected similar items. She set them aside, then pulled another bag. Inside were more photographs. Claudia at political fundraisers, standing beside senators and governors, her smile as polished as the pearls around her neck. Claudia shaking hands with military officers, cutting ribbons at charity galas. Claudia in a navy blue gown, standing on what looked like the White House lawn. Naomi turned one photo over. In careful script, Richard and me. White House reception 2015. Richard, her husband. A military man. A war hero, perhaps. Naomi studied the photo. His medals gleamed, his posture proud, his arm around Claudia's waist with the tenderness of decades of love. The story was unfolding, piece by piece. That evening, Naomi spread the photos across the living room floor. Marcus crouched beside her, fascinated despite himself. "This lady," he said, pointing to Claudia in a sequined gown. "She doesn't look like the kind of person who loses everything." Naomi nodded. She was someone important. She had money, influence, style. Look at this, charity awards, political connections. And this, her husband was decorated military. Marcus frowned. So why would her stuff end up in trash bags? Why here? Naomi had no answer, but she felt something stir in her chest. Claudia's life hadn't just collapsed into a storage unit overnight. Something must have happened. Later that night, Naomi sat alone at the table. The photos spread before her like a puzzle. She traced Claudia's face in one picture, her smile radiant. "Who are you, Claudia?" she whispered. "And why did your life end here, in black bags behind a padlocked door?" The next day, Naomi opened another series of bags. Among clothing and handbags, she found documents, business cards embossed with Claudia's name, Claudia Whitmore. Whitmore Consulting Services. Naomi's eyebrows lifted. Consulting? Event planning, perhaps. She pulled more papers from the bag. Tax returns, client lists, receipts for fundraisers. One letter caught her eye. "Thank you for coordinating the senator's fundraising dinner. Your attention to detail and your connections made the evening a tremendous success. We raised over $2 million. Naomi stared at the words. Claudia hadn't just been a woman with expensive taste. She had been a power broker. The kind of person who moved behind the scenes, shaping politics and raising fortunes. Her respect deepened. Claudia wasn't simply wealthy. She had built something. She had mattered. Naomi leaned against the cold wall of the unit, papers trembling in her hands. She imagined Claudia walking into ballrooms, her presence commanding attention, her silver hair gleaming under chandeliers. Naomi imagined the pride in Richard's eyes, the way he must have watched her from across the room. And now, all of it, every gown, every award, every heirloom lay forgotten in plastic bags. That night, Naomi couldn't resist calling Aliyah. "Baby girl," she said softly when her daughter answered, "I need you to help me research something." A woman named Claudia Whitmore. She had a consulting business. She planned political fundraisers. "Maybe you can find her online." Aliyah hesitated. "Mom, where's this coming from?" "I bought a storage unit. It's full of her things. Expensive things. But more than that, it's her life. I need to know who she was." Her daughter sighed, but curiosity edged into her voice. "Okay, Mom, I'll check. But please tell me you didn't spend too much money on this." Naomi's lips curved into a secret smile. "Let's just say, it might have been the best gamble of my life." The following morning, Naomi opened yet another bag. This one felt heavier, denser. Inside, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, were personal letters tied with a rubber band. She hesitated, then picked one up. "My dearest Claudia," it began. "Forever yours, Richard." Her hands shook. She shouldn't read them. These were private, but she couldn't stop herself from skimming a few lines. The words spoke of devotion, of battles survived, of gratitude for a lifetime of love. Tears filled Naomi's eyes. She placed the letters back gently, whispering, "Whoever you were, Claudia, you were loved, deeply." She packed the letters into a separate box marked personal. These weren't hers to sell. They belonged to Claudia's family, if any still remained. That night, Naomi sat with Marcus again, the letters and photos spread out like treasures. She wasn't just rich, Naomi said softly. She was extraordinary. She built a business. She influenced politics. She loved a war hero. And now, somehow, all of that ended here. Marcus leaned back, staring at the piles of clothing and jewelry still scattered around them. Mom, this feels bigger than just us selling stuff. It feels like a story. Naomi nodded, her throat tight. It is a story. And I think we're only at the beginning. Naomi didn't know it yet, but Claudia Whitmore's story was about to change her life forever. The bag still held secrets: pearls, diamonds, political memorabilia, artifacts of American history. But in that moment, sitting in her living room with her son, Naomi Carter felt something she hadn't felt in years: purpose. The next morning, Naomi returned to Unit Number 19 with a fresh surge of determination. She had slept barely 4 hours, her dreams filled with Claudia's face from the photographs, silver hair gleaming under chandeliers, a smile poised and steady, a woman who belonged in rooms Naomi had only ever glimpsed on television. Now Naomi wasn't just curious about what Claudia owned. She was desperate to know what Claudia's possessions would reveal next. The metal door screeched as she rolled it open. Cold air seeped from the unit, carrying the scent of dust, fabric softener, and something faintly metallic. Naomi pulled on her gloves, grabbed her box cutter, and dragged a new bag onto the tarp. This one was heavier. The plastic stretched taut as though it strained to hold its contents. Naomi sliced carefully, the blade tearing through layers of tape. The bag sagged open. Inside lay small boxes neatly stacked, jewelry boxes, dozens of them. Naomi's breath caught. She lifted one. Gray velvet, its lid stamped with silver letters, Jeweler's Exchange. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, nestled against black satin, gleamed a strand of pearls. The light shimmered differently across each one. Imperfect yet perfect, heavy with authenticity. The clasp was white gold, engraved with 14K. Naomi's knees buckled. She sat back on her heels, clutching the pearls as though they might vanish. Are these real? She whispered to the empty unit. She didn't need an answer. She knew. She opened another box. A sapphire pendant, deep blue, set in silver. Another box revealed garnet earrings, blood-red stones framed in delicate filigree. Fourth box held a bracelet inlaid with jade. Naomi pressed her hands to her mouth. This wasn't costume jewelry. This wasn't Brighton or Pandora. This was precious metal, genuine gemstones. Her pulse raced. She was no jeweler, but she had seen enough appraisals on TV to know. These pieces weren't hundreds. They were thousands. She closed the boxes carefully, placing them back into the bag with reverence. She whispered to Claudia's unseen spirit, "What were you doing with all of this?" Later that afternoon, Naomi called Aaliyah from the unit, her voice unsteady. "Baby girl, listen. I found jewelry. Real jewelry. Pearls, gemstones. I think some of this could be worth thousands." On the other end, Aaliyah gasped. "Mom, that's insane. Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. And there's more. There are documents, photos. Claudia wasn't just wealthy, she was connected. Political galas, White House events. She shook hands with senators. Maybe even presidents." Aaliyah's voice dropped. "Mom, be careful. If this is political memorabilia, some of it could be really valuable. Maybe even historic." Naomi's eyes swept the unopened bags piled against the walls. A shiver ran through her. "I think you're right." The next day, Naomi brought Marcus with her. She wanted him to see with his own eyes, to understand that this wasn't just junk. Together, they dragged another bag into the light. It rattled when it hit the tarp. Naomi cut it open, and the sound of clinking filled the air. Inside were wrapped objects, each cocooned in bubble wrap and tissue paper. Marcus unwrapped the first one carefully, his eyes widening. "Mom," he whispered, "this is a commemorative plate. President Reagan's inauguration, 1981. Naomi took it, staring at the certificate of authenticity tucked inside the box. Her hands shook. They opened another. A program from a White House Christmas reception. Embossed in gold leaf, Claudia and Richard Whitmore. Naomi's heart thundered. She pulled another box free. Inside was a brooch, pearls and diamonds set in white gold. The paperwork made her knees go weak. Certificate of authenticity. Pearl and diamond brooch, formerly belonging to First Lady Patricia Nixon. Acquired from White House estate sale. 85. Naomi covered her mouth. "Oh my God." Marcus leaned in, his voice hushed. "Are you saying this belonged to a First Lady?" "Yes." Naomi's whisper cracked with disbelief. This was worn at state dinners. It's part of history. She opened another velvet box, a gold compact engraved on the inside. To Claudia, with gratitude for your service to our nation. Nancy Reagan, 1987. Naomi's chest tightened. This isn't just valuable. This is priceless. Marcus sat back, his eyes wide with awe. Mom, we're sitting on a fortune. Naomi shook her head slowly. Not just a fortune, Marcus. A legacy. That night, Naomi spread the brooch, compact, and photographs across her kitchen table. She lit a single lamp, the warm glow making the diamonds flicker like tiny stars. She couldn't stop staring. Each piece carried not just monetary worth, but weight. Weight of history, of lives lived at the highest levels of power. She picked up the brooch again, her thumb tracing its delicate setting. Patricia Nixon had worn this. At dinners, at receptions. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a piece of America's story, and now it was in her hands. Naomi's throat tightened. She whispered to Robert's photograph on the wall. Can you believe this, baby? From garbage bags to the White House. The next morning, Naomi returned to the unit with renewed reverence. She opened bag after bag, finding more political memorabilia. Signed photographs of presidents and first ladies. White House Christmas ornaments, programs from state dinners. The pieces told a story. Claudia Whitmore wasn't just a socialite. She had been inside the rooms of power, a trusted donor, a respected organizer. And when Richard, her decorated husband, died, Claudia had carried on that legacy. Naomi felt her respect deepen. Claudia hadn't been ordinary. She had shaped history in her own quiet way, and now, somehow, Claudia's legacy had landed in Naomi's trembling hands. That night, Naomi called Aaliyah again. I think we need an expert, Naomi admitted. Someone who knows presidential memorabilia. This isn't just about money anymore. These things belong in a museum. Aaliyah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Mom, do you realize what this means? You didn't just find clothes and jewelry. You found history, and now you're part of it. Naomi looked at the brooch gleaming under the lamplight. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the pearls. Part of history. The words made her chest ache. She wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. But for the first time, she allowed herself to believe. Her gamble hadn't just saved her family. It had given her purpose. The following day, Naomi stood once more at the threshold of Unit Number 19, her breath fogging in the morning chill. She was no longer the same woman who had bid on a pile of trash bags in blind desperation. Each bag she opened pulled her deeper into the life of Claudia Whitmore, a woman she had never met, yet whose presence now filled Naomi's thoughts like an echo that refused to fade. Today, she didn't come just to search for valuables. She came to search for truth. Naomi tugged a heavy bag onto the tarp, its plastic stiff and dust-coated. She cut it open, expecting more jewelry or clothing. But instead, bundles of paper spilled out. Envelopes, yellowed at the edges, bound with twine. The handwriting across them was neat, precise, unmistakably personal. Naomi hesitated. Reading someone else's letters felt like trespassing into sacred ground. But her fingers moved anyway, drawn as if by gravity. She untied the first bundle and pulled free an envelope. It was addressed in elegant cursive, to my dearest Claudia. Her heart skipped. She slid the letter out, the paper brittle but intact. My dearest Claudia, tonight I march under a foreign sky, but I carry you with me. The thought of your smile is my armor, the memory of your voice my shield. If I do not return, remember that my last breath will have been filled with your name. Forever yours, Richard. Naomi pressed the letter to her chest, tears stinging her eyes. Richard Whitmore hadn't just been a decorated officer. He had been a man in love. She read another. Claudia, the doctors say I should not have survived the shrapnel, but I know why I did. I had unfinished promises to keep. You are children, the life we built, I would not let go. For you I will walk through fire again. Forever yours, Richard. Naomi's vision blurred. She had lost Robert 2 years earlier to cancer, and the grief was still raw. Reading Richard's words was like reopening her own wounds, but also like hearing Robert's voice again, gentle, steady, full of promises made in the face of despair. She whispered to the quiet unit, You loved him like I loved mine. As Naomi stacked the letters into a clean box marked personal, she uncovered another set of papers. These weren't love letters. They were legal documents, court filings, estate disputes, letters from attorneys. Naomi skimmed them, her stomach tightening. Claudia's children, James and Catherine, were named repeatedly. There were mentions of disagreements, accusations of mishandling finances, disputes over Claudia's care as her memory declined. One letter from Claudia's attorney chilled Naomi to the bone. The ongoing conflict between your children has left your estate in limbo. Without resolution, valuable assets may be lost or abandoned. I urge you to reconcile before irreversible consequences occur. Naomi sat back hard against the concrete wall. The story was taking shape now. Claudia hadn't abandoned her possessions. They had been casualties of family conflict, of broken promises. That night, Naomi brought the letters home. She and Marcus sat at the kitchen table under the warm glow of the single lamp, the piles of envelopes between them. Marcus picked one up, reading a few lines silently before setting it down. His eyes were wide. "Mom, this is like something out of a movie." Naomi nodded. "It's their life. A love story, and then something darker." Marcus frowned. "You think her kids just left all this behind? All of it?" Naomi touched the box of letters. "I think grief and money do strange things to families. I think promises get broken when pain gets too heavy." Her voice cracked on the last word. She thought of her own family, how Robert's illness had drained them, how easily Marcus and Aaliyah could have turned bitter under the weight of bills and loss. Somehow they had clung together, but Claudia's family hadn't. The next morning, Naomi opened another bag at the storage unit. This one contained photo albums, leather-bound, their spines cracked with age. She flipped one open. There was Claudia on her wedding day, young, radiant, standing beside Richard in his crisp dress uniform. His arm was around her waist, his gaze locked on her as though she were the only person in the world. Another page showed them with children, a boy and a girl, perhaps 10 and 12. James and Catherine, smiling in front of a Christmas tree, their faces lit with joy. Naomi's chest ached. Somewhere along the way, that joy had soured into silence. She turned more pages. Claudia and Richard at state dinners, at military ceremonies, at galas. Then, gradually, Richard vanished from the photos. Claudia stood alone, her smile still present but her eyes dimmer. At the back of the album, Naomi found a single loose sheet tucked between pages. It was a note written in shaky handwriting. "Richard has been gone 2 years. The children visit but not together. James accuses Catherine. Catherine resents James. They fight over what should be ours as a family. I feel like a guest in my own life. My memory slips. I cannot always recall their faces. But I remember Richard, always Richard." Naomi closed the album gently, her throat tight. That evening, Naomi called Aaliyah again. Aaliyah, it wasn't just clothing and jewelry. I found her letters. From her husband. From lawyers. Claudia had children, but they fought. Her possessions, her treasures ended up abandoned because of it. Her daughter's voice softened. "Mom, that's heartbreaking." "It is," Naomi said, her voice low. "And it feels familiar. We could have ended up like that. If you and Marcus had turned on each other after your dad died. If I had given up. But we didn't. That's why I can't just sell all of this and walk away. These things, these stories, they matter." That night, Naomi sat at her table with Robert's photo propped beside Claudia's letters. She whispered to her late husband, "She loved him like I loved you. She promised him she'd keep the family together. But in the end, her children broke apart. I can't let that be the ending of her story. Not after everything she preserved." Naomi's tears fell onto the letters, but she didn't wipe them away. In some way, it felt like sharing her grief with Claudia, widow to widow. By the time Naomi packed the letters into labeled bins, she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about money anymore. The handbags, the jewelry, the memorabilia, they were valuable. But the real treasure was the story, the lesson hidden beneath the velvet and the gold. Love could survive wars, sickness, and decades of hardship. But promises could still break when families forgot what truly mattered. Naomi Carter wasn't going to let that happen to her family. Not now, not ever. And somehow she knew. Claudia would want it that way. Naomi had always hated Mondays. For 2 years, Monday had meant another call from the mortgage company, another week of late fees piling up, Another round of pretending to her children that she still had everything under control. But this Monday was different. She sat at the kitchen table. Laptop open, Claudia's handbags spread across the surface like trophies. The Coach bag she had authenticated 3 nights ago glowed under the morning sun streaming through the window. The buttery leather looked like it had been waiting for this moment. Naomi snapped photos from every angle. Zippers, serial number, interior lining. Just like the guides Aaliyah had researched online. She wrote the description carefully. Authentic Coach hobo bag, excellent condition. Purchased from estate collection. Comparable retail value, $380. Starting bid, $99. Her fingers hovered over the mouse. She had never listed anything more valuable than used kids' clothes before. But she clicked post, and then she waited. By noon, the notification came, first bid placed, $125. Naomi clapped a hand over her mouth. It was real. Someone out there wanted Claudia's bag badly enough to put money on it. By 5 p.m., the bid had climbed to $180. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, his teenage skepticism giving way to awe. Mom, that's more than we spend on groceries for a month. Naomi laughed, the sound breaking into tears. And it's just one bag, Marcus. One bag out of dozens. For the first time in years, the numbers were bending in her favor. That evening, she listed another bag, then another. She pulled jewelry from its boxes, photographing Brighton charms and Pandora beads under the yellow glow of her desk lamp. She cross-checked prices, wrote honest descriptions, and prayed silently as she hit post again and again. By midnight, she had 10 listings live. The screen blinked with activity. Bids climbing, watchers adding items to their list. Naomi sat back in her chair, exhausted but electrified. Marcus brought her a glass of water. You're really doing this, Mom. You're building something. She nodded slowly. It feels like a second chance for all of us. The next morning, Naomi logged in to find 2 of the handbags already sold. One for $225, another for $175. She stared at the numbers, blinking hard. That's $400, she whispered. In one day, her phone buzzed. A message from the platform confirmed that once shipping was verified, the funds would be released directly to her account. She pressed her hands together, whispering to Robert's photograph on the wall. Baby, we might just make it. That afternoon, Naomi drove to the post office with Marcus riding shotgun. The 2 Coach bags sat carefully boxed in the back seat. Marcus fiddled with the radio, grinning despite himself. This is crazy. Yesterday I thought you'd lost your mind. Now you're shipping off purses worth more than my entire closet. Naomi laughed, her shoulders shaking with relief. Believe me, I thought I'd lost my mind too. They stood in line together, Naomi clutching the boxes like fragile treasures. When the clerk scanned the labels and handed her the receipts, Naomi felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building something new. Over the next week, Naomi turned the dining room into a command center. Cardboard boxes stacked in corners. Shipping tape clung to the edges of chairs. Claudia's treasures lay neatly sorted. Handbags here, jewelry there, clothing folded into bins. Aaliyah came home for the weekend, her arms full of printed guides on resale markets. She kissed her mother's cheek, her eyes shining with pride. Mom, I think you've got a business on your hands. Naomi smiled, though exhaustion lined her face. Second Chance Treasures, she said softly, testing the name out loud. That's what I'm going to call it. Marcus raised his eyebrows. You're naming it? Yes, Naomi said firmly. Because this isn't just about selling things. It's about building second chances. For us, and maybe for other families too. By the end of the second week, Naomi had sold over $2,000 worth of items. She had paid Aaliyah's overdue tuition bill. She had sent Marcus shopping for new sneakers. Real basketball shoes instead of patched-up hand-me-downs. And most importantly, she had made the first payment toward the mortgage arrears. The call from the mortgage company came as it always did. The same monotone reminder about foreclosure proceedings. But this time Naomi's voice was steady. I'll have your payment by tomorrow, she told the representative. In full, plus fees. There was a pause. Ma'am, are you certain? Naomi's lips curved into a smile. I've never been more certain in my life. That night, she celebrated with her children. They ate takeout pizza, laughing as though the weight of years had lifted. Marcus leaned back in his chair, wiping grease from his fingers. Mom, it feels like we're finally breathing again. Naomi reached across the table and squeezed his hand. We're not just breathing, Marcus. We're living again. Aaliyah raised her soda cup. To second chance treasures. They clinked their cups together, the sound small but powerful. Later that night, long after her children had gone to bed, Naomi sat alone at the table. Claudia's photographs lay spread before her. The pearls gleamed softly in their box. The brooch sparkled faintly under the lamplight. Naomi whispered into the quiet room. Claudia, you didn't know it, but you gave us our second chance. I promise you, I'll honor your story, her voice caught. She thought of the love letters, of Richard's devotion written in ink that had outlasted him. She thought of Claudia's shaky handwriting, lamenting her children's fights. Naomi brushed a tear from her cheek. I won't let your story end in broken promises. Not while I'm here. She glanced at the bank statement on the table. Mortgage nearly caught up, tuition paid, food in the fridge. For the first time in years, the future wasn't a black hole. It was a road. And Naomi Carter, widow, mother, survivor, was walking it with her head held high. Second chances weren't just found. They were built. One risk, one decision, one act of faith at a time. And Naomi was ready to build hers. The Carter home was finally beginning to feel alive again. The dining room, once a graveyard of unpaid bills, now pulsed with purpose. Boxes stacked neatly against the wall. A whiteboard scrawled with Marcus's neat handwriting tracked sales, shipping dates, and potential buyers. Naomi moved through it all with a kind of focused grace she hadn't known she still possessed. Everywhere she looked, Claudia's treasures shimmered like silent blessings. Handbags, jewelry, heirloom linens. But more than the objects, it was the feeling. For the first time in years, Naomi believed the ground beneath her feet might hold steady. That night, as rain pattered against the windows, Naomi sat at the kitchen table drafting more listings. She paused to stretch her aching back when a knock rattled the front door. At first, she thought it was the delivery man, late, maybe bringing boxes of shipping supplies. But when she opened the door, the sight froze her blood. A man stood in the porch light, tall, silver-haired, with a tailored suit that seemed out of place in her modest neighborhood. His face was striking, his eyes sharp yet weary. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked, his voice smooth but tinged with something heavy. "Yes," Naomi said carefully, her hand tightening on the doorframe. He offered a card. James Whitmore, CEO. Whitmore Security Consulting. Naomi's stomach dropped. Whitmore, Claudia's son. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Claudia's handbags and photographs stacked within sight. Marcus hovered in the doorway, suspicious, protective. James glanced around the room, his gaze lingering on the boxes and bins. "I think you know why I'm here." Naomi folded her arms. "I bought a storage unit legally. Its contents are mine." James nodded slowly. "I'm not here to challenge that. Legally, you're correct. But some of those items, they belong to my parents. My father's medals, my mother's personal letters. They weren't meant to be sold." Naomi's throat tightened. She thought of Richard's love letters, Claudia's journal entries. She had already promised herself she wouldn't profit from those. "I've kept the personal items separate," she said softly. "They're not for sale." James studied her face as though testing her sincerity. After a long pause, he exhaled. "That means more than you know." For a while, the kitchen was silent except for the ticking of the clock. James reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a photograph. He slid it across the table. It showed Claudia and Richard at a gala. She wore a sapphire necklace, radiant. Richard stood proud beside her, his hand resting over hers. Naomi recognized it instantly. The necklace was still in her possession. "She wore this the night before his deployment to the Middle East," James said, his voice cracking slightly. "I helped him choose it. He said it matched her eyes." Naomi pressed the photo to her chest. The weight of it, the love frozen in time, nearly undid her. "Why wasn't it with you?" she asked quietly. James's jaw tightened. "After my father died, my sister and I disagreed. About everything. Her care, the estate. We fought until there was nothing left but anger. That unit, it became the symbol of all we couldn't face. We kept paying the fees, telling ourselves we'd deal with it later. Then Mom's condition worsened. Dementia, she didn't even know us near the end." His voice broke. When she passed, the payment stopped. She didn't realize the unit was gone until it was too late. Naomi's chest ached. She thought of Claudia's shaky handwriting, her sorrow over her children's conflict. She had predicted this very outcome. Marcus stepped forward, his voice sharp. "So now you just show up and want everything back? After my mom risked everything to save us with this?" Naomi shot him a warning look, but James raised a hand gently. "He's right to be angry. I can't undo the past. And I won't insult you by pretending my family handled this well. I just want what belongs to my parents' memory." Naomi studied him, her mind a storm. She saw pain in his eyes, but also pride. She saw the son Claudia had loved, the son she had grieved over in her journal, even while lamenting his absence. Finally, Naomi stood and retrieved a box from the corner. Inside were Richard's medals, Claudia's letters, the photo albums. She placed it on the table between them. "These belong to you," she said. "Not the purses, not the jewelry, not the collectibles, but the memories, the love. That should be with family." James's eyes glistened as he lifted the box lid. He touched his father's purple heart with trembling hands, then set it back gently. "You treated these with more respect than I did," he whispered. For hours they spoke quietly. Naomi told him about discovering Claudia's treasures, about the way she had felt Robert's voice guiding her. James told her about his regrets, his broken relationship with his sister, his fear that his mother had died disappointed in them. At one point, Naomi slid Claudia's journal across the table. "You should read this," she said. She was confused, sometimes disappointed, but she never stopped loving you. James pressed the journal to his chest, his face twisting with grief. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't know what this means." Naomi did know, because she had felt it too. The weight of promises made to a dying spouse, the agony of trying to hold a family together. As the night wore on, James finally rose to leave. He shook Naomi's hand, then Marcus's. "I'll be in touch," he said, "not to take anything from you, but to make sure my mother's story is told the right way." He paused at the door, his eyes flicking to the bins of handbags and jewelry. "You've built something here." She would have been proud of that. Claudia loved seeing people create from nothing. She did it herself once. Naomi stood in the doorway long after he had gone, the rain soaking into the night. Her heart was heavy but also strangely light. The past had come knocking. And instead of collapsing, she had met it with open hands. Later, as she boxed Claudia's journal safely, Naomi whispered into the stillness, "Rest now, Claudia. Your story is safe with me, and with your son." She thought of Robert, of Richard, of the love letters that spanned wars and decades. She thought of Claudia's silver hair, her smile in those photographs, and she thought of the future. Second chances were fragile, but Naomi was learning how to protect them. The days following James Whitmore's unexpected visit were filled with a strange quiet. Naomi moved through her routines, sorting handbags, photographing jewelry, shipping packages, but her mind kept circling back to his face. The way his fingers trembled when he touched his father's medals, the way his eyes filled when she placed Claudia's journal in his hands. For the first time, Naomi felt she was not only carrying her own family's survival, but someone else's legacy. But that quiet was broken on Friday evening. She had just finished taping up a package when headlights swept across her living room curtains. A sleek black sedan rolled into the driveway, far too polished for her neighborhood. Naomi's stomach tightened. A knock at the door. James Whitmore stood there again, the rain soaking his suit shoulders, his expression unreadable. "May I come in?" he asked softly. Naomi hesitated, then nodded. They sat once more at the kitchen table. Marcus lingered in the hall, suspicious as ever, while Naomi folded her hands tightly in her lap. James cleared his throat. "I want to thank you again for what you've done, returning my father's honors, giving me my mother's journal. It means more than I can say." Naomi nodded but said nothing. She could sense something heavier was coming. Finally, James slid a photograph from his jacket pocket. Naomi recognized it instantly. Claudia at a gala, silver hair shining, sapphire necklace at her throat like a captured piece of midnight sky. "My father gave her this," James said, his voice low. It was his last gift before he passed. A necklace he chose because the sapphire matched her eyes. She wore it at every important occasion. It became Her promise to him. To keep going. He looked up at Naomi, his gaze piercing. You found it, didn't you? Naomi's chest constricted. She pictured the velvet box she had hidden at the bottom of her bedroom dresser drawer. The necklace gleaming like something alive. The handwritten note Richard had left tucked beside it. For my Eleanor. Wear this and remember that love transcends even death. Yes, she whispered. Silence stretched between them. The ticking of the wall clock seemed deafening. James leaned forward. I need it back. Not for the money. I have more than enough of that. But for what it means. That necklace is my parents' story. Belongs in our family. Naomi's fingers clenched. The truth pressed like a stone on her chest. That necklace could sell for tens of thousands, maybe more. Enough to pay off the mortgage completely. Enough to erase the last of Robert's medical debts. Enough to secure Aaliyah's tuition for years. It was salvation. Glittering and cold, but it was also a promise. She closed her eyes. James, do you know what that necklace represents to me? When I found it, I thought it was a sign that Robert was still guiding me. That maybe I wasn't cursed to lose everything. I saw hope in it. I saw a second chance, her voice cracked. And my children need that second chance. James's face softened, but his tone stayed steady. I don't doubt that. But my mother wore that necklace every anniversary, every state dinner, every time she needed to feel strong. She died with her family fractured, her treasures scattered. If that necklace stays away from us, then her story stays broken. Naomi's eyes burned with tears. And if I give it up, then mine might stay broken. The weight of both families' grief pressed heavy between them. Marcus entered then, his teenage voice cutting through the tension. Mom, don't let him guilt you. You saved us with this stuff. Why should we give away the one thing that could change everything? James turned to him, his tone patient. Young man, I understand your anger. I made mistakes with my mother too. But some things aren't about money. They're about memory. About promises. Marcus's jaw tightened. Promises don't pay bills. Naomi put a hand on her son's arm. Enough. She turned back to James. Let me show you something. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with the velvet box. Slowly, reverently, she opened it. The sapphire caught the light, scattering it across the room in fractured blues. Both James and Marcus fell silent, mesmerized. Naomi lifted the necklace gently. It felt heavy, almost alive, as though it carried the weight of Claudia's laughter, Richard's devotion, and every moment in between. This, Naomi whispered, isn't just a necklace. It's a lifeline. To your parents. And to me, for a long moment nobody spoke. Rain tapped steadily against the windows. Finally, Naomi placed the necklace back in its box and closed the lid. Here's my decision, she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. The necklace goes back to your family. Not because I don't need it. God knows I do. But because Claudia deserves better than to have her last promise sold to the highest bidder. She deserves to be remembered with dignity. James's eyes glistened. You would do that? Naomi nodded, though her throat ached. Yes, but on one condition. If I give this back, you make sure her story doesn't die in silence. You tell it. You preserve it. You honor it. Because if I let go of this, it has to mean something more than just jewelry returning to a safe. James stood, his voice firm with emotion. You have my word. When he left, Naomi collapsed into her chair. Marcus stood with his arms crossed, his face stormy. Mom, he said, frustrated. That necklace could have fixed everything. Naomi looked at him, tears streaking her cheeks but her gaze fierce. No, Marcus. It fixed something bigger. It reminded me who I am, and who we're supposed to be. She reached for his hand. Money will come and go, but promises, those are what carry us through. And I will not break Claudia's promise, or your father's. Marcus's eyes softened, though the frustration lingered. He squeezed her hand, not fully understanding but knowing enough. That night, Naomi placed the empty velvet box on her dresser. It felt strange, like a wound, but also like a release. She whispered into the silence. Robert, I hope you'd be proud. I hope I made the right choice. And in her heart, she thought she heard his voice again. You're stronger than you know, Maggie. Stronger than any necklace, stronger than any loss. Naomi fell asleep with tears on her pillow, but also with something she hadn't felt in years. Naomi Carter had always imagined auctions as cold, Distant things. Numbers flying across a screen, men in suits waving paddles. Treasures vanishing into vaults never to be seen again. But tonight, standing in the grand hall of Prestige Americana Auction House in downtown Washington, she realized it was something else entirely. The chandeliers glowed with golden light. Velvet drapes lined the walls. Glass cases displayed history itself. Presidential brooches, White House invitations, signed photographs. And in the center, surrounded by hushed reverence, lay Claudia Whitmore's treasures. Naomi's treasures by law. But her heart told her otherwise. She adjusted the simple navy dress Aaliyah had insisted she wear, the fabric clinging awkwardly to her shoulders. Marcus tugged at his collar beside her, looking wildly out of place among collectors in tuxedos and polished shoes. "Mom," he whispered, "these people look like they stepped out of a movie." Naomi squeezed his hand. "Don't worry. We're not here to impress them. We're here to do what's right." Her gaze fell on the glass case holding the pearl and diamond brooch, once worn by First Lady Patricia Nixon. The paperwork lay beside it, authentication glowing under the spotlight. Next to it sat the gold compact engraved to Claudia from Nancy Reagan. Naomi's chest tightened. These weren't just jewels. They were living echoes. Claudia's fingerprints were still on them. Richard's pride was woven into their stories, and tonight, they would be released into the world again. The auctioneer, a distinguished man with silver hair and an accent that made every word sound important, stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "tonight we are honored to present items of extraordinary provenance, directly tied to the history of the American presidency. We begin with Lot 47, the pearl and diamond brooch of First Lady Patricia Nixon." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Paddles shifted in eager hands. Naomi's pulse hammered. This was it. The moment she would see whether Claudia's treasures could truly change everything. "Shall we start at 20,000? The auctioneer called. A paddle shot up immediately. 25, 30, 35. The numbers climbed like rungs on a ladder Naomi had been afraid to even touch. 35 became 40, 45, 48. Naomi's breath caught when the gavel finally came down. "Sold for $42,000. The crowd clapped politely. Naomi nearly collapsed. 42,000. More than she had ever held in her life. More than Robert's medical bills had drained. More than the mortgage arrears. Marcus gripped her hand so tightly it hurt. "Mom, do you realize what just happened?" Naomi nodded, tears filling her eyes. "We're free, but the night wasn't over. Lot 48, the Reagan Compact inscribed by the First Lady herself. The bidding was even more fierce. 20 became 30. 30 became 38. Then 40. Naomi closed her eyes as the gavel fell. Sold for $28,000. The sound echoed in her chest like thunder. Together, the two items had brought in $70,000. 70,000. Enough to pay off the house, secure Aaliyah's college, rebuild the life they had nearly lost. Naomi pressed her fists to her mouth. Trembling, "Robert," she whispered to herself. "We did it." After the auctioneer announced a short recess, Naomi stepped outside for air. The night was cool, the city lights reflecting on wet pavement. She leaned against the railing, her heart still pounding, when James Whitmore appeared beside her. He was dressed impeccably as always, but his expression was softer than she had ever seen it. "They went for more than even I expected," he said quietly. Naomi nodded, wiping at her eyes. "It feels unreal." James studied her face. "You could have kept them hidden. Sold them quietly, pocketed the money, and no one would have known. But you chose to honor them publicly. That means something." Naomi looked down at her trembling hands. "I couldn't just cash them in like lottery tickets. Claudia preserved them for decades. They were never meant to die in a box." James smiled faintly. "You've done what my sister and I never could. You gave my mother dignity." Back inside, Naomi sat through the rest of the auction in a haze. More of Claudia's memorabilia sold. Signed photographs, White House ornaments, gala invitations. Each piece carried a story, and each brought in more money than she had ever dared to dream. But it wasn't just the money that moved her. It was the people who bid. Museum curators, historians, private collectors who spoke reverently about preserving the legacy. These items weren't disappearing. They were going somewhere they would be seen, studied, cherished. Naomi realized then that she wasn't losing Claudia's treasures. She was giving them new homes, just as Claudia must have once hoped. By the end of the evening, Naomi sat with Marcus and Aaliyah in the nearly empty hall, clutching the paperwork that confirmed it all. Over $90,000 in sales. Her children stared at her, wide-eyed. "Mom," Aaliyah whispered, "our lives just changed forever." Naomi exhaled a shaky laugh. "Not forever. Just back to what it should have been all along." She looked at them both, her heart swelling. "We're going to pay off the house, wipe out the debts, and then maybe we'll build something bigger. A business. A legacy." Marcus grinned, his eyes shining. "Second chance treasures." Naomi nodded, her throat too tight for words. Later that night, back at home, Naomi laid Claudia's photograph on the table. She lit a small candle beside it, letting the flame dance. "Claudia," she whispered, "your treasures didn't die in the dark. They saved us. And tonight the world remembered you." She touched Robert's photo next, tears streaming freely now. "I kept my promise, baby. Our children are safe. Our home is safe. And somehow, through all of this, you gave me the strength to believe again." The candlelight flickered across both photographs, Claudia and Robert side by side. Two lives that had never crossed yet had somehow intertwined to save Naomi and her children. Naomi closed her eyes and let herself feel it fully. Relief, gratitude, and the fragile, powerful hope that tomorrow truly could be brighter. The morning after the auction, Naomi woke to silence. No buzzing phone from debt collectors. No heavy envelope of overdue bills on the counter. Just silence. For the first time in 2 years, silence meant peace instead of fear. She rolled out of bed and padded to the kitchen, the old floorboards creaking under her feet. Marcus was already at the table with a notebook, scribbling numbers furiously. Aaliyah leaned against the counter, sipping coffee, a grin tugging at her lips. "Mom," Marcus said, eyes wide, "do you realize what this means? The house is ours. No more foreclosure notices. No more panic calls," Aaliyah chimed in. "And my tuition's paid. Not just for this semester, for the whole year. I even bought the textbooks already." Naomi sat down slowly, letting their words wash over her. She clasped her hands together, whispering, "Robert, we made it." Her late husband's photo still stood on the mantel, watching quietly. That afternoon, Naomi drove to the bank. The sun broke through gray clouds as she handed the teller a cashier's check for the full mortgage balance. With trembling hands, she signed the final document. "Congratulations, Mrs. Carter," the teller said warmly. "Your home is officially paid off." Naomi stepped outside into the crisp autumn air and laughed, an unrestrained, giddy laugh she hadn't heard from herself in years. She tilted her face toward the sky, tears mingling with joy. They were free, truly free. But Naomi's journey wasn't just about survival anymore. Within weeks, she officially registered Second Chance Treasures as a business. Marcus designed a sleek logo, a golden key opening a chest. Aaliyah handled social media, posting photos of items with captions that told the story behind them. Naomi's dining room became headquarters. Boxes stacked neatly, inventory spreadsheets updated daily, orders packed with care. Local consignment shops began calling her, asking if she would evaluate estates. Word spread quickly. A woman with an eye for value, a heart for history, and the integrity to honor the past. Soon, Naomi wasn't just selling things, she was helping families. Widows overwhelmed by their late husband's belongings. Children unsure how to handle decades of memories. Naomi walked into their homes with gentleness, sorting, cataloging, and ensuring each piece found a rightful future. She had gone from desperate mother to businesswoman, from widow on the edge to leader of her own story. One Saturday evening, her family gathered in the living room. Aaliyah sat on the couch, scrolling through the online shop. Marcus was sprawled on the floor, sketching designs for business cards. Naomi sat in her armchair, a cup of tea warming her hands. "Feels different in here," Marcus said suddenly. "Like the air's lighter," Naomi smiled. "It's because we're not just surviving anymore. We're building." He looked up at her. "Dad would be proud, wouldn't he?" Naomi's throat tightened. She nodded. "Yes, he would." Aaliyah leaned forward, her eyes shining. "And Claudia, too. She didn't know it, but she gave us this chance. We're carrying her story with us, Naomi's heart swelled. For the first time, the name Second Chance Treasures felt like more than a business. It was a mission. 2 months later, a package arrived at the Carter home. It was large, heavy, addressed to Naomi in elegant script. The return label read, Whitmore Security Consulting. Naomi's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a mahogany shadow box, the glass polished to a shine. Mounted inside was a replica of Colonel Richard Whitmore's bronze star. Beneath it, a brass plaque engraved, For courage when it mattered most. Tucked beside the box was a handwritten note from James, Naomi. You gave back what money couldn't buy, my parents' dignity. You reminded me what family should mean. This replica is not payment, it's recognition. Because what you did for my family took the same courage my father carried on the battlefield. My mother would have wanted you to have this. James Naomi pressed the note to her chest, tears streaming freely. She carried the shadow box to the living room and set it above her desk, where she could see it every day. Marcus stood beside her, awestruck. Mom, that's like a medal for you. Naomi smiled through her tears. It's not for me alone. It's for all of us, for second chances. Spring arrived, and with it, new beginnings. Naomi hosted a family reunion in the backyard. For years, she had avoided her siblings out of shame, too embarrassed to admit how low she had fallen after Robert's death. But now, with her debts cleared and her spirit renewed, she welcomed them with open arms. Children laughed, smoke rose from the grill, and voices filled the air with warmth. Naomi looked around and realized she wasn't just healing her own family. She was stitching together broken pieces, creating something whole again. At one point, her brother Michael pulled her aside, holding one of her new business cards. Maggie, you built all this out of nothing. Naomi shook her head, smiling. Not out of nothing. Out of someone else's ending. That's the beauty of it. Every treasure has a story before it reaches us, and a story after it leaves. Michael nodded slowly. Second chances. You've made them real. That night, after everyone left, Naomi sat at her desk. The replica bronze star gleamed in the lamplight. Beside it stood Robert's photo. She whispered, We did it, Bobby. We made it through. And I didn't just keep us alive. I built something that will last. She thought of Claudia and Richard, of their love letters and promises. She thought of James carrying his parents' memory with renewed respect. And she thought of her children, Marcus with his wide-eyed determination, Aaliyah with her brilliant fire. They had been her reason, her anchor, her why. Naomi closed her eyes, letting the moment settle deep inside her. Second chances weren't given freely. They had to be fought for, risked for, believed in, but once found, they could transform not just one life, but many, forever. Naomi Carter didn't just buy a storage unit. She bought back her life. She uncovered love letters, medals, and heirlooms that outlived war, grief, and even dementia. And in doing so, she found the strength to honor the past while rewriting her future. Her story is a reminder that sometimes endings are only beginnings in disguise. So ask yourself, if everything you love was locked away in a forgotten room, who would you trust to open that door? Would they see trash or treasure? If this story moved you, made you cry, made you angry at life's unfairness, or made you believe in second chances again, then don't just click away. Share it. Let others feel this truth, that love, dignity, and courage can survive even the darkest storage units of our lives. Because in the end, second chances aren't just found, they're built. And they can last forever.